Good day to everyone, especially to our professor in this subject, Judicial and Legal Ethics, to our professor, Attorney Mo Estrella, and to all my classmates. Today, together with my group mates, we are tasked to report parts of Canons 4 and 5 under the Code of Professional Responsibility and Accountability for Lawyers. This is my task, and let me report this to you using this slide. The legal profession is a noble calling that demands not just intelligence and skill, but also an unwavering commitment to excellence. Canon 4 of the Code of Professional Responsibility and Accountability sets the gold standard for legal practice by mandating competence and diligence. A lawyer is not merely an advocate, but a fiduciary, meaning he's entrusted with the sacred duty of upholding justice. This canon reinforces the principle that legal service, whether paid or pro bono, must be accepted with utmost dedication, thorough preparation, and professional integrity. It is not enough that lawyers simply know the law. They must be able to master it, apply it with precision, and most importantly, with vigilance, so to protect the client's rights. Failure to do so does not just weaken an individual's case, but it undermines the integrity of the legal system itself. So let's start with Canon 1. Canon 4, Section 1. Canon 4, Section 1 talks about competent, efficient, and consensuous service. A lawyer shall provide legal service that is competent, efficient, and consensuous. A lawyer shall be thorough in research, preparation, and application of the legal knowledge and skills necessary for an engagement. So it means to say that when a lawyer is handling a case, it's not only enough that he knows the law, but a lawyer, even though after fulfilling the rigorous requirement of academics and passing the board exam, should not stop, should continue to become a lifelong learner, especially in defending cases. This section underscores the duty of lawyers to be well prepared and knowledgeable in the legal matters they handle. Competence, not just having a law degree, but also ensuring that they understand the laws, procedures, and case specifics before accepting a case. Efficiency requires a lawyer to use time and resources wisely, while conscientiousness means fully committing to the client's cause. For example, if a lawyer is handling for example, a complex labor dispute, the lawyer must study labor laws, precedents, and the case specifics rather than relying on general knowledge. Let's proceed to Section 2. Section 2, undertaking legal services, collaborating counsel. A lawyer shall only undertake legal services he or she can competently deliver with the prior written consent of the client. A lawyer may secure the services of collaborating counsel. In this section, lawyers must recognize their limitations, their limits, and not take cases beyond their expertise. If they require assistance, they must inform and get the client's consent before bringing in another lawyer. This prevents lawyers from mishandling cases due to lack of knowledge. For example, a lawyer with no experience in intellectual property law should refer the client to an intellectual property specialist instead of guessing legal strategies. So also not to jeopardize the client, the case, and especially not to tarnish the entire legal system. Section 3, talking about diligence and punctuality. A lawyer shall diligently and seasonably act on any legal matter entrusted by a client. A lawyer shall be punctual in all appearances, submissions of pleadings and documents, and all professional commitments. This is the reason why it's a training for us law students in the College of Law that we become also punctual in our submissions, in our deliverables. Because after all, if we become full-fledged lawyers some days, punctuality will still be an important values or behavior that we must possess. This section highlights the importance of time management in legal practice. A lawyer's failure to act promptly or attend hearings on time can prejudice the client's case. Punctuality also builds trust between the lawyer and the court, opposing counsel, and, of course, the client. For example, if a lawyer fails to submit a required pleading on time, the case might be dismissed due to procedural lapses. So that is why Section 3 is very important. Now, let's proceed to Section 4. Diligence in all undertakings. So, a lawyer shall observe diligence in all professional undertakings and shall not cause delay in any legal matter. A lawyer shall appear for trial adequately prepared, knowing the law, case, facts, and necessary evidence. This Section 4 of Canon 4 prevents lawyers from using delay tactics that could jeopardize justice. A lawyer must always come to court prepared, ensuring they have all necessary documents, judicial affidavits, and arguments ready. For example, a lawyer appearing in court without knowing their client's defense strategy may be sanctioned for lack of preparedness. So that is how important Section 4 is. Now, citing all the 4 sections, citing a case, for example, in the case of Palencia versus Linsangan, the Supreme Court addressed issues related to competence and diligence in administrative case number 10557. In this case, the complainant, Jerry Palencia, engaged the services of the respondent lawyers to represent him to a legal matter in Singapore. The respondents, without obtaining Palencia's prior consent, the respondents in this case are the lawyers, hired foreign counsel and incurred expenses on the respondent's behalf. Furthermore, they failed to provide a timely and accurate accounting of the funds received and disbursed in relation to the case. This action raised concerns about their adherence to the ethical standards expected of legal practitioners, particularly regarding competence and diligence. The Supreme Court found that the respondents violated several canons of the Code of Professional Responsibility and Accountability, including those pertaining to the sections which I earlier discussed. The court emphasized that lawyers must act with competence and diligence in handling their clients' affairs, which includes obtaining necessary consent before engaging external counsel, and accurate and provide prompt, accurate accounts on financial transactions related to the client's case. As a result, the court suspended the respondents and from the practice of law for 2 years and order them to return the amounts due to the complainant. The decision underscores the judiciary's commitment to upholding ethical standards that lawyers must fulfill their duties and the required competence and diligence. So, in the end, as what our professor have always reminded us, competence and diligence, even if we are still student lawyers, are not mere aspirations. They are the very foundation of ethical lawyering. As stewards of justice, lawyers have a profound responsibility to ensure that every client receives quality legal representation. That is the beauty of Canon 4 and its importance to us, future lawyers. I'm Carl Belientes. Thank you very much for listening to my report. Stay tuned for the next sections to be reported by my group mates. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. Today we'll discuss Canon 4, Section 5, 6, and 7. Competence and diligence. A lawyer professionally handling client's cause should, to the best of his or her ability, observe competence, diligence, commitment, and skill consistent with the fiduciary nature of lawyer-client's relationship, regardless of the nature of the legal matter or issues involved, and whether for a fee or a pro bono. Section 5. Prompt and objective assessments of the merits. A lawyer shall, after a reasonable inquiry, promptly give an objective assessments of the merits and probable results of the client's case. A lawyer shall explain the viable options to the client to enable an informed decisions regarding the matter. So what is a reasonable inquiry? A reasonable inquiry, this is one by which a lawyer, before certifying a pleading or legal document, means conducting a thorough diligent investigation to ensure the information provided is accurate and truthful and that the pleading is not filed for delay. A lawyer must explain in all viable options to the client to ensure that they can make an informed decisions about their case, which is a core principle of legal ethics and the code of professional responsibility and accountability. Now, in the case of Rinaldo Ramirez versus Attorney Margallo, the respondent, the court held that when an action or proceeding is initiated in the courts, a lawyer becomes the eyes and the ears of the clients. The lawyers are expected to prosecute or defend the interests of their clients without the needs or reminders. The privilege of the office of attorney grants them an ability to warrant their client that they will manage the case as if it were their own. The relationship between an attorney and a client is a sacred agency. It cannot be disregarded on the excuse that the lawyer accepted the case only because he or she was asked by an acquaintance. The professional relationship remains the same regardless of the reasons for the acceptance by counsel, regardless whether the case is highly paying or pro bono. In this case, Attorney Margallo in action resulted in a lost appeal, terminating the case of her client not on the merits but of her negligence. She made it appear that the case was dismissed on the merits. In truth, she failed to file the applicant's brief on time. She did not discharge her duties of candor of her client. In addition, the court ruled that the relationship between a lawyer and the client is imbued with utmost trust and confidence. The lawyers are expected to exercise the necessary diligence and competence in managing the cases entrusted to them. They commit not only to review the cases or give legal advice, but also to present their clients to the best of their ability without the need to be reminded by either the client or the court. The expectation to maintain a high degree of legal proficiency and attention remains the same whether the represented party is high-paying client or an indigent litigant. In the case of Saldivar versus Cabañas Jr., a lawyer was suspended after failing to justify his absence in a scheduled preliminary conference, which resulted in the case being submitted for resolution. This was aggravated by the lawyer's failure to inform his client about the adverse ruling of the Court of Appeals thereby precluding the litigant from further pursuing the appeal. The Court of Appeals or the court found out that this action amounted to gross negligence tantamount to breaching Canons 17 and 18 of the Code of Professional Responsibility. A case law also further held that a lawyer's duty of competence and diligence includes not merely reviewing the cases entrusted to the counsel's care or giving sound legal advice, but also consists of properly representing the client before any court or any tribunal, attending scheduled hearings or conferences, preparing and filing the required pleadings, prosecuting unhandled cases with reasonable dispatch, and urging their termination without waiting for the client or the court to prompt him or to do so. Conversely, a lawyer's negligence is fulfilling his duties subjects to the disciplinary action, while such negligence or carelessness is incapable of exact formulation. The court has consistently held that a lawyer's mere failure to perform the obligations due his client is a per se violation. This information asymmetry is even more pronounced in an attorney-client relationship wherein lawyers are expected not only to be familiar with the minute facts of their cases, but also to see their relevance in relation to their causes of action or their defenses. The salience of these facts is not usually patent to the client. It can only be seen through familiarity with the relevant legal provisions that are invoked with their jurisprudential interpretations, more so with the intricacies of the legal procedure. It is the lawyers that receive the notices and must decide to the mode of appeal to protect the interests of his or her client. Thus, the relationship between a lawyer and her client is regarded as highly fiduciary. Between the lawyer and the client, it is the lawyer that has the better knowledge of facts, events, and remedies. While it is true that the client chooses which lawyer to engage, he or she usually does so on the basis of reputation. It is only upon actual engagement that the client discovers that the level of diligence, competence, accountability, the counsel that he or she chooses. In some cases, such as this one, the discovery is too late between the lawyer and the client. Therefore, it is the lawyer that should bear the full cost of indifference or negligence. Section 6. Duty to update the client. A lawyer shall regularly inform the client of the status of the result of the matter undertaken and any action in connection thereto, and shall respond within reasonable time to the client's request for information. So the lawyer must provide the client any update regarding the case that is submitted in the court for adjudication. Now, when a client requests for a follow-up on his case, the update from a lawyer must not only be prompt, but also full and effective. The lawyer must not merely brush aside the client's request without even perusing the case records, for the client is entitled to a full disclosure on the material development on his case. To be clear, a lawyer need not wait for their clients to ask for information, but advise them without delay about matters essential for them to avail of legal remedies. This is in the case of Katipunan versus Carrera. A lawyer's duty to keep his client constantly updated on the development of his case is crucial in maintaining the client's confidence. The lawyer needs to inform his client timely and adequately important updates and the status affecting the client's case. He should not leave his client in the dark as how he is defending the client's interest. This is also the case of Gabocan versus Naredo Jr. Now, here the complainant requested for an update on the case twice, first in March and second in May 2010, but instead of being truthful to the complainant, the respondent lied through his statement claiming that the case was still pending resolution, even though he was already aware that it already got dismissed as early as February 25, 2010. When the complainant eventually uncovered the truth, he confronted respondent who simply shrugged it off, saying that there was nothing more he could do. When respondent repeatedly failed to apprise the complainant of the degree of the denial of the latter's petition, the respondent is deemed to fail to fulfill his duty under the rules. Now, in a case of Sison versus Dumlao, while the respondent may later refuse to represent complainant, as in this case when she was requested by the complainant's mother-in-law to refrain from interfering in complainant's domestic issues, it was still incumbent upon the respondent to inform the complainant that she would no longer be able to represent him. When the complainant asked respondent for an update of his case on February 26, 2014, respondent did not inform him that she would no longer be connected with the case due to conflict of interest, even though she was approached by complainant's mother-in-law sometimes before November 2013. It was only when she filed her answer before the Integrated Bar of the Philippines that the complainant learned of the reason why respondent would not be representing him. The court has stated that the facts that one is, at the end of the day, not inclined to handle the client's case is hardly of consequence. Respondent's duty as a lawyer compels her to act not only with diligence but with candor as well. She should have been upfront with complainant once she decided that she would no longer interfere in complainant's trouble. In a case of Gabocan versus Narido Jr., Attorney Narido Jr. claims that he constantly updated complainant through his representative Almonia. However, Attorney Narido Jr. did not present any document establishing such fact. It is logical that Attorney Narido Jr. should have at least a document formally informing the complainant of the status of the case. He stated that he knew that the complainant was hardly in the Philippines, then it would have been more prudent in keeping with his duty to inform his client of the status of the case, to formally inform the complainant in writing and not merely verbally through Almonia, which Attorney Naredo Jr. has not proven. Here, Attorney Naredo Jr. admitted that he did not file any comment or memorandum before the Court of Appeals, since he was already confident that it was no longer necessary because the Court of Appeals will affirm the findings of the MCTC and the Regional Trial Court. This arrogance of the part of Attorney Naredo Jr., he was no way of knowing that the Court of Appeals will indeed rule in favor of his client. In fact, the Court of Appeals reversed the rulings of the MCTC and the Regional Trial Court. The least that Attorney Naredo Jr. could have done was to file a manifestation stating that his client, complainant, is waiving his right to file a comment or memorandum, since the pleadings he filed before the lower courts sufficiently established the cause of complainant. Attorney Naredo Jr. that have simply disregarded the filing of the comment or memorandum. He owes to his client to exert his best diligent efforts to protect the client's interest. His failure to file comment or memorandum required by the Court of Appeals, especially in an arrogant, presumptuous way, and his failure to inform the complainant of the status of the case constitute inexcusable negligence which entails disciplinary action. Now, if there is a dismissal of the case, the lawyer must explain to his client about the said dismissal. It is not enough that lawyers inform their clients of the dismissal of the case. It is also the lawyer's duty to give information as to why the case was dismissed. To be clear, a lawyer need not wait for their client to ask for information, but must advise them without delay about matters essential for them to avail for legal remedies. A lawyer so engaged to represent a client bears the responsibility of protecting the latter's interest with utmost diligence. The lawyers bear the duty to serve his clients with competence and diligence and to exert the best efforts to protect within the bounds of the law and interest of his or her client. Accordingly, competence not only in the knowledge of law but also management of cases by giving these cases appropriate attention and due preparation is expected from a lawyer. This is the case of Aboy Sr. versus Viocos. Now, let's go to Section 7, Extension of Time to File. A lawyer shall avoid asking for an extension of time to file any pleading, motion, or other court submission, except when allowed by the rules of court or for a good cause. When an extension is obtained, the lawyer shall not let the period lapse without submitting the pleading, motion, or other court submission, except upon the client's decision not to pursue the case in any further or for other justifiable cause. So the court may grant an extension of time to file if it demonstrates a valid and justifiable reason or a meritorious one.
Good morning, sir. Today I will going to discuss Canon 4, particularly Section 8, Section 9, and Section 10. But before I proceed, let me first explain, sir, on Canon 4, the competence and diligence, to be able to understand Section 8, Section 9, Section 10. So, competence, sir, and diligence are two qualities that are highly valued in both personal and professional context. They are often used together. They have distinct meaning and implications together. If we say competence, referring to the ability or something successfully or efficiently, it is about having necessary skills, knowledge, and expertise to perform a task or job effectively. Confidence is the foundation for success in many areas because it ensures that an individual has the requisite capabilities to handle challenges and responsibilities. With regards to diligence, it refers to a careful and persistent work or effort. It is the quality of being attentive, dedicated, and hardworking. Diligence is often more about attitude, works, or ethics, and perseverance of certain persons brings to their task, rather than just the natural abilities they possess. Diligence also, on the other hand, is about how you approach the task. It focuses on the effort, particularly in persistence and care, which you complete a job regardless of your current skills or current skill levels. So let us proceed to Section 8 of Canon 4. Can you please take the slide, ma'am? Okay. Section 8 in Canon 4, referring to a lifelong learning. It was stated here, a competent lawyer engaged in a lifelong learnings through continued development of professional skills. Meaning, lifelong learnings for a competent lawyers is an ongoing or voluntary and self-motivated pursuit of knowledge for personal or professional development to lawyers. For competent lawyers, lifelong learning is essential because it enables them to stay updated, adapt to challenge legal landscape, or enhance their professional skills. Lifelong learnings helps lawyers hone their skills, broaden their knowledge, or maintain their effectiveness in practicing laws. Lifelong learnings also includes personal growth of lawyers. The legal professions can be stressful, syempre, demandable. So learning development is essential for sustaining a long and fulfilling career in the field of law. For competent lawyers, lifelong learning is not just a matter of acquiring knowledge or skills, but ongoing commitment of what we call this professional growth, adaptability and ethical practice, embracing new technologies, improving soft skills, and even maintaining high ethical standards. Lawyers can provide better service for their client, especially for advance their careers and contributes meaningfully to the legal professions that they have. This commitment for lifelong learnings is just not only beneficial, but it is very essential to sustain success in the complex of ever-changing world of law. So let us proceed to section 9 of this Canon 4. Can you please take the slide, ma'am? Okay. Section 9 provides practice of law concurrent with another professions. A lawyer is engaged in another professions or occupations concurrently with the practice of law shall expressly provide in the pertinent contract the nature of the service the lawyer is engaged to perform. The practice of another professions or occupations shall not jeopardize such lawyers' competence, integrity, probity, and independence in rendering legal service. In section 9, explaining or provides that address the ethical professions standards that apply to lawyers who practice law concurrently with another professions or occupations, because some other lawyers are having this what we call another occupations rather aside from being a lawyer, a full-time lawyer. So it layouts important guidelines for ensuring that a lawyer works in a one field does not negatively impact their ability to competently, ethically, or independently provide legal service. The key point about these sections, to understand the section 9, is that there is what we call a concurrent practice. So, concurrent practice, yun yung practice ng mga lawyers aside from their another job. This is varying situations where lawyers practice laws simultaneously, engaging in other professions or occupations. Like for example, lawyers might also have a financial advisor, or maybe a professors in a college of law, a real estate agent, or even engage in another business ventures. So ito yung sinasabi dito. There is also what we call disclose of contract dapat dito sa kanila. So the lawyers must clearly disclose the nature of other professions or occupations in any relevant contracts. Meaning that if the client is hiring the lawyers for legal services, the lawyer should explain any other professions responsibilities that they have that could be potentially impact their availability on the nature of the service being provided. For example, practicing law is also working as a real estate agent should be informed their client about the real estate or business in the contract, clarifying that they have this what we call obligations aside from their other obligations. So it is also including in these sections is the competence and integrity. Should the lawyer concur engage in another professions, must have not compromise their other tasks. What they call this, they also have this what they call integrity. So it is very essential as a lawyer must maintain a high ethical standard even when juggling multiple professions. They should not allow their work in other professions to be result in any unethical behavior, such as conflict of interest, or improper disclosures of disclosures of confidential client informations. So to sum up these sections, lawyers practicing another professions alongside their legal work must ensure very important to ensure that this dual practice does not compromise their legal competence, integrity, probity, or independence by explicitly outlining the nature of their concurrent professions in the client contracts and managing potentials conflict of interest. Is a lawyer can maintain a high ethical, yung pinaka-important sa high ethical standard and uphold their profession's responsibilities This approach ensures that client continue to receive quality legal services without undue influence from other professions that the lawyers have. So can you please take the last slide, please, ma'am? So we can proceed to section 10. So section 10. Okay, the non-legal activities. So a lawyer who is engaged in a business or other non-legal profession shall likewise observe the ethical duties and responsibilities as a lawyer under the CPRA. Ano ba itong tinatawag na CPRA or the ethical duties under the CPRA? So these sections highlighted that a lawyer who engaged in a business, nang gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, or non-legal activities in addition to their legal practice, must still uphold the ethical duties and responsibilities which prescribed by the Code of Professional Responsibilities for Attorneys, yung sinasabi natin na CPRA, yung Code of Professional Responsibilities for Attorneys, or any applicable ethical rules governing lawyers in their jurisdictions. So, ano ba itong non-legal activities na sinasabi dito? So, non-legal activities is referring to activities that are not directly related to the practice of law. A lawyer may engage in a business venture such as managing or a company, working in other professions field, example yung real estate, mga finances, or participating in community organizations or other non-legal professions. So ethical duties under CPA for the equivalent ethical codes such as the ABA Model Rules for Professions Conduct by the US set out that the professionals and ethical obligations that all lawyers must follow. These rules are designed that lawyers shall maintain high standard of conduct in their practice, especially to avoid behavior could undermine the integrity of legal professions. So dito na yung papasok din sa these ethical duties includes yung mga confidentiality ng mga information sa mga kanilang mga client, avoidance of conflict of interest, where lawyers prohibited from engaging activities that could create conflict of interest between their legal client and their non-legal business dealing. Sample, lawyers involved in the business ventures must ensure that their business interests do not conflict with the interests of their legal client. So, yun. So para hindi magkaroon ng conflict of interest. So example dito is yung ethical duties apply. Yung examples are how ethical duties apply. So lawyers who have own business must ensure that their business practice are lawful and ethical. So hindi pwede yung mga illegal business. It should be ethical business. They cannot engage, for example, or fraudulent business. Hindi sila pwede mag-engage ng mga fraudulent business practice or violate consumer protections law. Kasi nga magkakaroon sila ng unethical doon sa part nila. So hindi sila pwede mag-engage ng mga fraudulent business, which is napaka-importante as a lawyers. So these sections to summary this section 10, when a lawyers engage in a business or non-activities, they must continue to observe the same they need to observe the same ethical duties required by the CPRA or other ethical standard applicable to the legal professions. Yung behavior kasi ng lawyers in both legal and non-legal spheres must reflect the value of integrity, professionalism nila, confidentiality nila, like I said, and impartiality. Lawyer must manage potential conflict of interest to protect client confidentiality and maintain their professional reputations regardless of their involvement in other professions or business ventures. To ensure that lawyers maintain public trust, pinaka-importante, and the integrity of the legal professions at all times.
Now, I will be discussing Canon 5, Equality, an essential principle in the legal profession. As lawyer, one must uphold the fundamental belief that every person, regardless of nationality, gender identity, ethnicity, religion, marital status, or even socioeconomic background, has the right to equal treatment and representation under the law. Our personal beliefs, whether political or religious, should never interfere with our duty to represent our clients fairly and with the highest level of professionalism. Within the new Code of Judicial Conduct, Canon 5 is a direct articulation of the constitutional demand that justice must be dispensed equally and that judges, and by extension, all officers of the court, should avoid any form of bias or discrimination. This canon echoes the Philippine Constitution's guarantee of equal protection of laws under Article 3, Section 1, and the general commitment to uphold human rights. Let's explore the principle further. One of the core aspects of Canon 5 is the principle of non-discrimination. A lawyer must never refuse to represent a client solely based on characteristics such as race, gender, age, disability, or social status. For example, if a client is accused of a crime, a lawyer cannot decline representation simply because of a public opinion about the client's guilt or based on invidious distinctions. While lawyers have freedom to choose clients, a refusal based purely on, let's say, religion of the potential client is considered unethical, especially if it prejudices the person rather than a valid conflict or capacity issue in part of the lawyer. However, there are justifiable reasons for refusing representation, such as ethical conflicts or lack of competence in handling the case. Instance where a lawyer may need to decline a case if there is a conflict of interest. For example, if they are being asked to represent a client whose interests directly oppose those of another current or former client, let's say representing one spouse in a divorce while previously representing the other spouse in a related case. Another situation where the lawyer's personal beliefs or affiliations might compromise their ability to provide objective and zealous representation of the client. For instance, if a lawyer is heavily involved in environmental advocacy and then is being asked to defend a company accused of significant environmental damage, of course, it could create a professional and ethical conflict. Example, where a lawyer should refuse a case if they lack the necessary legal knowledge or experience to handle a case effectively. Let's say the case involves a foreign jurisdiction or area of law where the lawyer is not qualified to practice, such as international law or maritime law. It may be appropriate to refuse representation unless they can gain competence quickly or work with someone who has such expertise. So, basically, refusing representation for these reasons not only ensures that the client receives the best possible legal service, but also upholds the integrity and ethical standards of the legal profession. In legal practice, some clients require special attention due to their circumstances. These individuals are considered vulnerable persons, and these include children and the elderly, the homeless and persons with disabilities, human rights victims and those affected by armed conflict, ethnic minorities, and socioeconomically disadvantaged individuals. So, as lawyer, one must be mindful and sensitive to their unique situations. This means that going beyond basic legal representation by ensuring they fully understand their rights and options. Lawyers must not refuse representation to indigent persons, especially those without sufficient means for food, shelter, or basic needs. So, what are the exceptions for the refusal? No, so this may include first, the lawyer lacks the ability to provide competent representation, as we've discussed in the previous section. The case presents a conflict of interest. The lawyer has a personal relationship with the opposing party, let's say within specific degrees of relation as provided by the law. Finally, Canon 5 emphasizes that lawyers must provide the same level of service to all clients, regardless of whether they are paid or not. However, when dealing with vulnerable persons, lawyers are expected to apply an even higher standard of service. This ensures that those who are at a disadvantage receive the legal support they deserve and need. At the core of this principle is the belief that justice should not be reserved only for the privileged, but rather it must be equally accessible to all. In summary, Canon 5 underscores the unwavering commitment of the Philippine legal system to dispel discrimination, prejudice, and bias. Founded in constitutional principles and refined by the Supreme Court's ethics regulations, it ensures that every participant in the justice system is accorded respect and fairness. While its explicit textual source is the new Code of Judicial Conduct for the Philippine judiciary, the spirit of Canon 5 necessarily extends to all lawyers who share in the duty to uphold the rule of law and champion equal access to justice. In practice, this commitment means judges must be alert to potential biases and apply the law uniformly. Lawyers must conduct themselves in a manner that respects diversity, treats clients and adversaries without prejudice, and maintains the integrity of legal proceedings. The public is entitled to assurance that the courts and the legal profession will not impede or distort the pursuit of justice based on any irrelevant distinctions. Ultimately, equality is not just a canonical requirement. It is a foundational ethic that underpins the legitimacy and credibility of the legal system in the Philippines, ensuring that no individual is denied justice.
Let us now continue the discussion. Let us proceed to Canon 6, which is accountability. Canon 6 provides that by taking the lawyer's oath, a lawyer becomes a guardian of the law and administrator of justice. As such, the lawyer should observe the highest degree of morality, adhere to rigid standard of mental fitness, and faithfully comply with the rules of the legal profession. Failure to honor this covenant makes the lawyer unfit to continue in the practice of law and accountable to society, the court, the legal profession, and the clients. The lawyer's oath is a promise that a lawyer makes when they begin practicing law. Lawyer's oath. The result of lawyer's oath is that the lawyer agrees to become a guardian of the law and an administrator of justice. This means that the job of the lawyer is not only to know the law, but also to make sure that justice is carried out fairly. Under the lawyer's oath, it also emphasizes that the lawyer must have highest standard of morality. This means that a lawyer must act in an honest, fair, and ethical way at all times. Not taking or not following the lawyer's oath will result, or the lawyer may be considered to unfit to practice law, because not following the oath hurts not only the lawyers, but also the society, the courts, the legal profession in the client. That is why lawyer's oath is so important, because it makes sure that lawyers act with responsibility, honesty, and fairness. Okay, let us now proceed to the section 1 of Canon 6, the nature of disciplinary proceedings against lawyers. Section 1 provides that disciplinary proceedings against lawyers shall be confidential in character and summary in nature. Nonetheless, the final order of Supreme Court or the Supreme Court shall be published like its decision in other cases. Disciplinary proceedings against lawyers are a process where the behavior of a lawyer is reviewed to see if they have violated any rules or ethical standard. These proceedings are private and not open to public. This means that the details of investigation or hearing are kept confidential to protect the privacy of those involved, including the lawyer. So the process is also summary in nature, which means that it is intended to be quick and straightforward. However, as you can see on the last part, even though the proceedings are confidential and brief, the final decision or order made by the Supreme Court regarding the lawyer's case will be made public. This is similar to the cases that are handled or that has decision by the Supreme Court. If the section 1 is the nature of disciplinary proceedings against lawyers, the section 2 is the process of how these disciplinary proceedings is instituted. Now, section 2 provides that proceedings for disbarment, suspension, or discipline of lawyers may be commenced by the Supreme Court on its own initiative or upon the filing of verified complaint by the Board of Governors of IBP or by any person before the Supreme Court or the IBP. However, a verified complaint against a government lawyer which seeks to discipline such lawyer as a member of the bar shall only be filed in the Supreme Court. A verified complaint filed by the Supreme Court may be referred to the IBP for investigation, report, and recommendation, except when filed directly by the IBP, in which case the verified complaint shall be referred to the office of the VAR confidant or such fact-finding body as may be designated. Complaints for disbarment, suspension, and discipline filed against incumbent justices of the Court of Appeals, Sandigan Bayan, Court of Tax of Appeals, judges of lower courts, or against lawyers in judicial service, whether they are charged singly or jointly with their respondent, and whether such complaint deals with acts unrelated to the discharge of their official functions, shall be forwarded by the IBP to the Supreme Court for appropriate disposition under Rule 140 as amended. Now, let us start understanding the paragraph 1. Under paragraph 1, okay, let us now understand the paragraph 1 of section 2. Under the paragraph 1 of section 2, it provides that proceedings for the disbarment, suspension, or discipline of lawyers may be commenced by either of these two: by Supreme Court initiative or upon the filing of a verified complaint. It's either by the Board of Governors or IBP or by any person before Supreme Court or IBP. However, in the case of government lawyers, this only be filed before the complaint may only be filed by the Supreme Court. I mean before Supreme Court. Okay, let us now proceed to the paragraph 2 of section 2. So the paragraph 2 emphasizes that when a verified complaint is filed directly with the Supreme Court, the court may refer it to the Integrated Bar of the Philippines for investigation, report, and recommendation. This means that the IBP would conduct the initial investigation and gather relevant information before providing its findings and recommendation to the Supreme Court, except if the IBP is the one filing the verified complaint directly. It is not referred to the IBP for investigation. Instead, the complaint will be referred to the office of the bar confidant or any other designated fact-finding body. So, again, in paragraph 2, complaints filed with the Supreme Court are generally referred to the IBP for investigation, except when the IBP itself files the complaint, in which case it will be handled by the bar confidant or other fact-finding body designated by the court. Now, let us proceed to the last paragraph of Section 2. So, under paragraph 3 of Section 2, complaints for disbarment, suspension, or discipline can be filed against incumbent justices of Court of Appeals, Sandigan Bayan, Court of Tax Appeals, and judges of lower courts, as well as lawyers in the judicial service. So these complaints, whether filed singly or jointly with other respondent, are to be forwarded by the IBP to the Supreme Court. The complaints can be involved acts unrelated to the discharge of their official functions, but are still subject to scrutiny. So once the IBP forwards these complaints to the Supreme Court, it will be the responsibility of the Supreme Court to make the appropriate disposition, following the procedures that are outlined under Rule 140 of the Rules of Court. Okay, proceeding to the next section, which is the Section 3, the content of the complaint. The complaint must be verified, meaning the complainant affirms that the information provided is true and accurate to the best of her knowledge. The complaint should clearly and concisely specify the acts or omission that are being complained about. This ensures that the complaint is direct and understandable. The complaint must be supported by judicial affidavits of witnesses, which are the sworn statements made by the individuals who have direct knowledge of the alleged misconduct, and additional documents that could help substantiate the allegation should also be included. Now, for the filing procedure, if the complaint is filed before the IBP, the complaint must file 6 copies of the verified complaint. And then after filing, the Secretary of IBP or any of its chapter is responsible for promptly forwarding the complaint to the IBP Board of Governors.
Assalamualaikum, I'm Salim Manor. Now let's move to Section 4 to 6 of Canon 6 Accountability, which covers the qualifications of investigating commissioner, the assignment by raffle of investigating commissioner, and the complaints against the government lawyer. According to this Section 4, to ensure that these investigations are carried out by competent individuals, the IBP recommends a list of 150 lawyers who meet certain qualifications. These lawyers must be in good standing, meaning they must have an unblemished record in terms of ethics and professional conduct. And also, they must be in good repute, meaning they are respected and trusted within the legal community. The IBP selects these individuals proportionately from its 9 regions across the country. This ensures that the process is fair and representative of the diverse legal landscapes in each region. This list of recommended lawyers, along with their curriculum vitae, is then submitted to the Supreme Court. Only those lawyers who are approved by the Supreme Court will be appointed as investigating commissioners. These individuals are appointed for a term of 3 years. However, they can be removed or replaced earlier if necessary. The list of approved commissioners is updated regularly by the IBP, especially in cases where someone is removed, replaced, or resigns. After they are appointed, each investigating commissioners must take an oath of office prescribed by the IBP. This ensures that they commit to performing their duties with the highest degree of responsibility, impartiality, and professionalism. Once the Supreme Court approves the list of investigating commissioners, the IBP Board of Governors is responsible for assigning an investigating commissioner to each case. This assignment is done through a raffle system. Why a raffle, you may ask? The raffle ensures fairness and randomness in the assignment process. It prevents any bias or conflicts of interest in selecting who will investigate the complaint. Each case is assigned to one investigating commissioner, but in some special circumstances, a panel of 3 investigating commissioners may be assigned to handle a particular complex or serious case. This process ensures that the assignment of investigators is unbiased and transparent, which is maintaining the trust of the public in the legal system. And lastly, the Section 6. When a complaint is filed against a government lawyer, the process is slightly different compared to complaints against other lawyers. Upon receiving a complaint, the investigating commissioner has a very specific task to determine within 5 calendar days whether the concerned government agency, the Ombudsman, or the Supreme Court has jurisdiction over the matter. This step helps ensure that the complaint is addressed by the correct authority. If the allegations in the complaint suggest that the government lawyer is unfit to continue practicing law, the investigating commissioner will proceed with the investigation. The continuing obligations of a government lawyer, including their fitness to practice the profession, are key factors in making this determination. However, if the allegations do not involve issues related to a lawyer's fitness to practice, or if the complaint does not fall under the jurisdiction of the investigating commissioner, the complaint may be dismissed. In this case, the commissioner will recommend the dismissal of the complaint and explain the rationale behind this decision. This process ensures that only valid complaints that affect a government lawyer's professional conduct and fitness to practice are investigated. It helps streamline the disciplinary process and ensures that resources are focused on cases that have real merit. And that's all for Group 4. Thank you po.